I've got a little mic on. Hello, good morning. I'm feeling really nervous after that setup. I'm like, it's like about 7 a.m. my time, and I've only had one cup of tea. That was actually one of the most impressive and swift introductions to ESG and what's going on at the moment. Really, really good. And one of the things which I wanted to say is that I'm proudly woke. And I became proudly woke when I investigated the etymology of woke and where that concept came from, which is from the struggle in the US primarily around the black communities, running back, going 20, 30 years. In many ways, it's an appropriation of a word from civil rights and from black empowerment in the US. And so when you start thinking about woke in the framework of injustice, and particularly in the framework of Black Lives Matter, I think it's difficult to say that I'm not woke, because what's the alternative? Completely fucking asleep. So, yes, sorry, a little bit of swearing. So Futerra, my agency's mission, and we're an independent agency, we're about 70 people around the world, and majority female-owned, is to make the Anthropocene awesome. Isn't that great marketing, to use a word that no one's ever heard of? So the Anthropocene is the geological age dominated by human beings. Human beings have evolved during the Holocene geographical age, but essentially the geographers are now saying, in future millennia, you will always know that humanity existed because we are leaving our mark on the very planet, on the stones, on the rocks, on the geography of this planet. Now, most people say the Anthropocene is a bad thing. We know we're in Anthropocene because of lead and petrol that have leached into rocks. At Futerra, we're like, if this is the age of humans, if we are so powerful that we are leaving our very impression on the planet itself, we get to choose. We get to choose whether the Anthropocene is a disaster or whether the Anthropocene is awesome. Futerra is a climate solutions provider under the UN. Anyone in this room who's become a B Corp, as we are, knows how difficult it is. It's nothing compared to becoming a climate solutions provider. I had to open my books to the UN. So it's quite scary opportunity, but we're so proud to have reached that opportunity. And there's so many amazing clients in the room. So as Will said, we stand right now in 2023 in a choice. On one side, you've got the exploitative and extractive economy, where we've already hit 1.1 degrees of global warming, which doesn't sound like very much until you look around what's happening in the world at the moment, particularly some of the flooding in Pakistan, and as we'll talk through, the issues in Asia, where we're in the 6th mass extinction, where wild animals make up less than 3% of the biomass on the planet. The rest of the biomass on the planet is human beings and the poultry and dairy and meat animals that we use to feed us. So less than 3% of the life on this planet, of the biomass, is wild animals. And where there are more slaves on planet Earth right now than there has been at any point in human history. And for those of you who know our human history, that might come as a bit of a surprise, that there's more people in modern slavery today than at any other point. On the other side, on the idea of a solutions economy, it's 8 to 10 billion fed, free, educated human beings living in a restoring biosphere, where we're beginning to solve and reverse some of the environmental consequences. Now, a couple of years ago, people felt like this was a little bit of a balance. Honestly, today, when I show this slide, people are like, yeah, but like, aren't we like totally screwed? Hasn't that ship sailed? Now, if you look at how we planned in things such as the Paris Agreement and in the Montreal Protocol and in all these amazing international standards, if you look at how we planned climate action to happen, yes, we are hugely, massively behind. We are not going to hit the Sustainable Development Goals. We are very unlikely to stay within 1.5 degrees of global warming. We are very behind on linear change. Thankfully, linear change isn't how human beings do change. We do not do linear change. One of the reasons why we don't do linear change is that we don't like change. And linear change requires us to stay in a daily, consistent, forever state of change, which is not how human beings change. What we do is we hang on to business as usual for as long as we possibly can, then we go through an explosion of terrifyingly swift change, and we end up at another steady state. It's called punctuated equilibrium. And all of the sociologists and historians will explain to you that humanity goes through punctuated equilibrium. So when you look at how we have gone through periods where we've gone from where equal marriage was something which was absolutely unsayable to being something which is then legal, women's suffrage, technology, when you look at how energy systems are changing. And even when you look at, just for Earth Day, Google released a whole load of statistics showing this exponential curve of interest and searches on Google for sustainability issues. So this is how it's going to happen. And we're about here. So change has already started. It's already begun. We're beginning to feel it. The fact that we're in this room having this conversation is a sign of it. But the next 7 years are going to see more ESG and sustainability change than the previous 2 decades. And I know that because I've been around doing this for more than 25 years. And the last 18 months has seen more activity than in the previous 5-10 years. Another thing which really reinforces this for me is that at the top is a survey that was done globally with Ipsos Mori, asking the general public in China and Brazil, across the global north, across the global south, whether they were optimistic about climate change. And the global public is not very optimistic about climate change. Only 17% of people think that we can and will solve climate change. 31% of people think that we could, but we won't. They're like optimistic about technology and really pessimistic about human beings. But when you ask the solutionists, and the solutionists are the CSOs, the scientists, and the activists working in sustainability, the people who know to a very specific degree of science how fucked things are, they really, really understand how bad things are getting, they are overwhelmingly optimistic. And the reason why they're overwhelmingly optimistic is because they also know about the solutions. And again, when we ask global publics whether they know more about the problem or the solution to climate change, they overwhelmingly, 80% say they know about the problem, but they don't know about the solutions. So that's where we are. We're in a situation where emotionally, we have got to change the context of climate change from fear and terror to hope, anger and rage to purpose, grief to awe, confusion to confidence. We are in this phase where 56% of young people, 56% think that they're doomed, that there's no point investing in a pension, that there's no point thinking about their career too much, there's no point getting a house, there's not much point in having children, because actually they don't have a future. Whereas the experts, including the scientists, think we've got everything which we need to solve this. I am more afraid of fatalism, I'm more afraid of these negative emotions than I am of climate change. Because climate change is just chemistry. Culture is much harder to change. Now, I want to just say a word, because I'm talking about people in a very big way. Just say a word about people. So a wonderful social scientist called Pat Dade, a huge guy from Minnesota who wears a lot of white. He looked at how we do mapping and typologies on sustainability. And it was all demographics. It was all about age and race and geography and politics. And he said, but these issues, how we relate to other people in the outside world, are more to do with our values than to do with our demographics. And so he developed a psychographic rather than a demographic on sustainability. And it's something which over the last decades I've found so useful in this work. And gold prospectors are the majority group. I'll come to those in a moment. The green pioneers, this is where I sit. The green pioneers in Jungian psychology are inner directed. So they get their sense of self by what they think of themselves. They are global citizens. They've got more in common with someone who thinks about the world the same way they do in a different culture than they do with their neighbor. The idea that community means geography is like madness to them. No, I've got nothing in common with my neighbors. I've got common with people, communities of interest. They think a lot about the future. They're very future focused. They're very excited about what's coming up. They like to think of themselves outside of the mainstream. So they were the first people who wanted an electric car and the first people to say, actually, no, we need to get rid of cars entirely and get on buses instead. In many markets, they're the first people to take on recycling, and then as soon as recycling becomes a mass behaviour, they're the first ones to say, no, we need to design out waste. They're always pushing at the edge. At the exact opposite end are the brick settlers. The brick settlers live in a geography. They are extremely connected to their neighbours and to their local community, and the rest of the world is practically mythological. It's almost as if it doesn't really exist. That's where things like climate denial often come from. Obviously, there's a great deal of vested interest in climate denial, but in the general public, climate denial tends to come from going, I'm not entirely sure the whole planet exists. So how can climate change exist? All that really exists in my friends, my neighbours, the people in my local community. They tend to be quite backwards looking to the past for inspiration, thinking that tradition and stability really matters, and they're very concerned about things such as being a good homemaker, being a good provider. Now, as you can imagine, those green pioneers and those brick settlers just cross each other. There's literally no point of content for them, although they both care about the environment. The green pioneers care about issues about climate change, about global endocrine disruptors, about huge international environmental issues. And the brick settlers care about dog mess in the street and the tree that got cut down and whether children have got access to local green space and their local river. They are motivated around the environment just in completely different ways. By the way, it's really difficult if you've got two of these types in the same family. And then you've got the gold prospectors, who are the majority of every population. We've done this work in China, we've done this work in Indonesia, we've done this work in Mexico, and the gold prospectors are the majority of every population. The gold prospectors, these are the people who are interested in fashion, status, and success. They are led by, both in terms of their beliefs and their behaviours, by whatever is mainstream at the time. What that means is that they can look really environmental 1 minute, and as if they've got these deeply held values, and then suddenly in the next minute they change. And it's what happened, for example, in Sweden, where Sweden considered itself to be a very deeply green culture, both in terms of environmental beliefs, but also social beliefs. When I showed that slide, they were like, no, like 90% of Sweden is your green pioneers. And then suddenly a right-wing resurgence happened, and all of the people who held these deeply held beliefs realized that no, the majority of your population were golds. It was just that being green was fashionable. Being green was socially acceptable. Holding these values was something that made you well respected within society. As soon as that changed, suddenly the golds came up to grabs, and the greens were very, very lethargic in moving forward. Now, we are in a moment of transformation right now across all of these groups. Different types of searches for how to live a sustainable lifestyle. For the golds, that's how do I get a Tesla? For the greens, that's how do I completely dematerialize my community, and for the bricks, that's how do I save energy. These searches around how to live a sustainable lifestyle are increasing by 4,550%. People around the world want this. They are asking for it. And what I'm asking you is, who's answering those questions? Who's answering the public? Like, you're probably doing a lot of market research. You're probably even doing a lot of social listening. Are you looking at the Google searches about you and about these issues and working out who is answering those questions and who's answering them on ChatGPT? Because this all comes down to you. Over all these years of working, trying to convince, trying to be persuasive, sometimes having a little cry in terms of trying to get this work done, I've realized the policy really matters, the technology really matters, the infrastructure really matters, but it all comes down to people. All of that policy, all of that infrastructure is because somebody took a decision and managed to convince other people to take that decision, which means this room is an incredibly important room. You are an incredibly important group of people. You are solutionists, you have influence, and you are lucky enough to live in this small window that we get to make a decision about the future. What an amazing opportunity. So many other generations don't have the opportunity that we do. What you'll probably find, in my book when I researched all these solutionists from fantastic activists, Paul Polman, Christiana Figueres, to CEOs, Jesper Brodin from IKEA, Mads Nipper from Orsted, Bill Gates. I interviewed all of these people and I discovered that when it comes to making change, you are probably one of three types. And this is the final thing I'm going to share with you, because you're probably sitting there going, am I a gold, a brick, or a green? That really matters in terms of how you think about the world. But that isn't the type of change maker you are. This is the type of change maker you are. You are either an architect, that you operate at this massive big level where you see everything, you're trying to put strategies together, you're thinking about combining issues. How does environmental justice relate to poverty, relate to climate change? You think at the International Space Station level about change, and you really love to take on a knotty problem and work and think your way through to the solution. Or you're an actioneer. And the actioneer is, can we please stop talking about the why and talk about the what? What are we going to do? What are the actions? I'm great at getting things done, at making things happen. I'm the kind of person who sees a problem and is almost immediately thinking about the solution. In fact, I annoy my friends with this because they bring me problems, and rather than just listening, I'm going, well, have you thought of doing this, this, and this, and this? These are the actioners, the people who are always about making a difference. But one of the groups that gets neglected in sustainability is the accelerators. The accelerators are the people. Those who are able to help develop, nurture, pull together fantastic teams, make sure that you've got the right people involved, reach out, inspire, motivate, care for those. They're the people who are able to recruit and bring in different views, different sorts of people into sustainability. And they always start with human beings. So very quick, who in here would out themselves as an architect? I'm afraid I am a massive architect. There's a few people going, oh, I'm a huge architect. Who would out themselves as being an actioneer? Yes. You see, this is an actioneer thing. Hand goes straight up. Accelerators. Brilliant. I'm so pleased to see so many accelerators in this room, because actually we talk a lot about the do, we talk a lot about the why, we don't talk enough about the who. And you, as accelerators, are going to be thinking about how do you nurture and drive and encourage and train the change makers that we need. By the way, thank you so much for those who are taking photographs. I'll make sure these slides are available to everybody afterwards. You are solutionists. The very fact that you're here having this conversation, that you've come to Istanbul, that you want to talk about ESG and sustainability means that you are already a solutionist. But please do read my book to become a better one. Thank you so very much.